All right, so I'm calling things to order here. How's everybody doing in week 8?
Week 8? Yeah.
Excited. All right.
So, yeah.
Oh, first your sign. Where's your sign? I have to keep on top of you about that. All right.
Energy.
First order of business, any notes on the minutes before we hear a motion? Any concerns, questions? All right, anyone have a motion to approve?
I move to approve minutes from 10:29.
All right, do we have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes from October 29th, please indicate. All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? And did you get a vote from Dennis? Or was it-
I raised my hand as I was coming in. I heard your announcement. I have no opposition.
The motion passes. I'm not sure where Linda and Sue are, so I guess we will move along to Mary Ann's report.
Okay, so first of all, you may remember that we were looking for volunteers to join the Tuition Advisory Council. And Dennis Slattery and Leslie Eldridge came forward, so now we needed 2 to 3, we have 2. So if you want to be the third one, you know, it's still a possibility, but we're okay to go, so that's good. And then as far as we had some volunteers for the task force for evaluations, to look at evaluations. And it was super popular. We actually got more names than we needed, but we also had a great lack of diversity. So we reached out to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to ask them what they thought of it and if they could recommend some names. And so we've been given 4 names, and we'll reach out to those people and see if we can create a more diverse, especially that committee that's going to look exactly at that kind of thing. So we'll have more by the next meeting for sure on that, if not before. Or not committee on committees? Okay, so I need to bring 2 hats. So after 3 years of being on that committee, I actually looked at the bylaws to see what we were supposed to do. And it turns out we weren't doing what we're supposed to do. We were supposed to fill the committees, and that we were doing as, we were trying to, known as the most nagging committee on campus. But it turns out that the bylaws say things that we don't do at all, like, and I actually don't want to go into detail in it today because it's not, but just look out for a document that's going to come out with what the document says now, what actually isn't happening in reality, whether these things should or should not happen, and so you'll have a multicolored thing that looks a little bit like this coming to you next week. And we have our DEHL representatives on our committees, so that is super exciting. Some of them are split, and some of them can't start right away, but we have them, so that's wonderful. And also, because I looked with our committee, Precious and Paul, we looked at the charge of our committee. We drew up a little message that we're sending to all the chairs of the committees, asking them partly for how things are going, if the meetings have started, if they're being filled by all the members, and also asking them to give us the schedule of their meetings so that we can assign students to those groups. But I did hear back from Jim Hutton, and he said that he already gave information to the student body and the student senate, I think, and hasn't heard anything back. So that's something else we need to look into. But soon we'll have the schedules for all the committees, and hopefully we can get a student on them. And I think that's it.
I had a
Yes.
question about FPAR. I had one of my faculty brought up a question, can I bring that up now?
Sure.
That said that they found it kind of odd that they had to do an annual evaluation in the same year they went up for promotion. And if you could bring that up to the advisory committee when they're discussing the FPAR issue?
Okay, do you have that or do? Melissa, you have it?
Yeah, I got
Okay, okay, great, yes,
Thank you,
we
that was
will.
it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
All right. President Schott.
I apologize for being late. Just a couple of things. I think I've mentioned this before, but I want to make sure there aren't any surprises. On November 29th, Oregon Tech, Klamath Community College, Rogue Community College, and SOU will be announcing a new Southern Oregon Higher Education Consortium. We'll sign an agreement in Klamath Falls that morning, then over in Medford that afternoon at the HEC, because we're building on the 10th anniversary of the HEC, so the first collaboration of this type. At this point, it means that we are going to try to work together better to serve learners of this region more effectively and efficiently and provide clearer pathways and on and off ramps, things like that. But we don't have any details. And it also means that we're going to try to meet the needs of employers, anticipate the needs of employers, and sort of be a more active agent in the economic development and thinking about how this region wants to grow and develop economically. So spread the word. I don't want you to see it in the paper and go, oh my God, what is this? It's not a merger, it's not an acquisition, that's all it is at this point, and it's a promise at this point to collaborate. We'll work out what it means, but like one example today, the legislature passed a bill last session, I think, or 2 sessions ago, called the Cultural Competency Bill, and every public institution, but including the public universities, we have to do certain trainings and monitorings and stuff around cultural competency. And so we said, well, hey, there's an example. Maybe all 4 institutions could have a group that works together to say, because the bill's kind of vague, what are the standards? What do we think might be used to measure them? How will we report on this? So we might be able to ease the work on each individual institution a little bit by thinking together about how we do something like that. So I don't think there's anything threatening to SOU, or I wouldn't be participating in it. I believe it's an opportunity that can help raise all of our collective votes. So that's the spirit in which it's being pursued. Second, just give you a quick update on searches. We have a Chief Diversity and Inclusivity Officer Title IX Director search going on. That's chaired by Omarosa Alvarez and Sabrina Prudhomme. They will be bringing candidates to campus the week after Thanksgiving. And they are very pleased with the 3 candidates that they plan to bring. Similarly, the Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Affairs that Sue Walsh is chairing. That's why Sue's not here. She's in a meeting with that group right now. They also will be bringing 3 to 4 candidates, trying to get them in that week or the week after. I apologize profusely for the timing. I know it's a bad time for faculty. I know it's a bad time for students. And we weighed all of that. But we also think it's so important that we get these leaders on campus that we didn't want to, lose people out of the pool by waiting over the holidays, or just postpone when they might be able to come on campus and begin helping us. So appreciate your involvement in those searches where you have time to be there. And the schedules and everything will be announced as we get a little more information. On the Director of the Honors College, Janet Fratella is heading that. And they will be having people to campus in January, because there they know, I mean, they really want to have a lot of student involvement, and they knew that there was no way they were going to get these candidates in before students scattered for the break. So that's where we are on those. Anybody have any questions for me about anything? Ask me anything. Charles?
So, any chance that we can make a little political hay out of this collaborative agreement on the front side of legislative session? Is there some thinking going on there?
Yes, we're definitely going to try. And we did tell Ben Cannon about it, and he was like, oh, that's wonderful, that's exactly what we want to see. And we're going to get a lot of publicity. I think the 4 presidents are going to be on KOBI 5 on 5, and I believe we're going to be on the next morning on Jefferson Exchange talking about this, so we'll be getting some publicity that way. And anytime we can convince legislators that we're trying to be more effective and efficient, that certainly doesn't hurt.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks. Anything else?
Linda, I was wondering if you would, if you had anything more to say about the professional learning communities?
Thanks. I have them just about done. I want to charter some more professional learning communities, as I mentioned the ones last time, I think, that had to do primarily with faculty. I added to them, I sent them out, I got some feedback, and I just haven't had time to incorporate the feedback. Maybe I can do that tonight and then get them out. And one more thing, we're gonna start a sort of high-level committee on university ceremonies. Right now, we're thinking that would be commencement, convocation, and homecoming. And we already have committees that work and organize all those things, but this one would be higher level. Really, how do we get traction from those? They're major marketing events, they're major fundraising events, they're major events in the life of our students. So we would probably be asking for a couple of faculty members who are interested in that kind of thing to work on that. But I'm going to try to have the first meeting of that group before the break, just kind of organizational meeting. We want to make those events more meaningful, and we want to have students on them because we want the students to, be invested in these. And as part of the town gown, we're also looking for how can we partner with the city. We're bringing 3,000 or more people here for commencement, and we don't do anything with the business community around that. Shakespeare opened on the same weekend last spring, and so we're overloading the hotels and the restaurants. So just trying to think together about how we can make the experience better and benefit the Ashland community as well as the University. Anything else?
I don't know if you were going to talk about it, but I was teaching at the time on Thursday when you had the state of the university and the follow-up meeting. Was there anything that you wanted to share about, say, not necessarily your comments at the official comments, but I recall you might have had planned a workshop sort of idea generating thing? Any results out of that?
On me, I think we ran long with the presentation part of things, so we didn't have as much time for the conversation as I had hoped. But we did have some, and we transcribed those. I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. I asked how many people had learned something, and I think almost every hand in the room went up. So I think it was good just as a baseline knowledge building about what we're already doing in marketing and recruitment and stuff. We'll get some ideas out of that. Plan to do another one probably February around retention, so everybody has the big picture of all the things we're doing to try to promote retention. And I'm going to try to build that one so we have a little more processing time in that. And then I think I forgot to mention, I'll try to get those professional learning community things out this week, and we can get organized on having some fun reading and thinking about some more topics. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? And so Sue will not be with us today.
I don't think so. She may come in late, but I don't think so.
All right, well then our next order of business is guest presentation from Osberg. Just a note here, Jeff Gayton was originally supposed to attend as well, but he was not able to. And some materials have been added to the Senate Drive late on this presentation, so they may be referring to some things that you do have access to, but they came to us a little bit late. So, Alex?
Hi, my name is Samantha, and I'm an intern with Osberg for this term.
I'm Darcy, I'm the chapter chair of Osberg.
And I'm Alice, and I'm the vice chair of Osberg.
So what Osberg is it stands for Oregon Student Public Research Group, and we're a student-led organization, including our leaders and our volunteers. We work here on campus and on campuses across the state as well as the country. And our goal all over the place is just to change the world for the better. Today, we're here with our campaign on specific for textbooks. Our goal is to reduce the cost of higher education by making textbooks free for students. The problem that we're trying to solve that we're dealing with is, well, there's only 5 major companies that control over 8% of the textbook market. And because they rarely compete with one another, they're able to inflate the prices as much as they want with little to no consequences. They also tend to release new editions of textbooks that really have little to no difference to previous editions and doesn't add or change anything to the class curriculum, but is just more expensive. Now they're also implementing access codes, which are online links needed to be paid for to use online textbooks, to do the homework, quizzes, tests, basically any of the classwork that's required. It also forces students to pay prices that they just can't afford, and just to be able to do the classwork. It also destroys the used book market as it makes any used textbooks useless. Our proposed solution to this is to implement OERs on campus, which are open education resources. These are free online textbooks that are written by professors in order to fit their class curriculum. These can also be printed out for students that prefer a physical hand copy of their own to use. But even then, just the price for printing it out is 80 to 90% cheaper than current textbook costs.
So as Sam mentioned, our Osberg chapter is part of a larger national organization, which often does its own research. Over the past couple years, the student PIRGs have found that textbook prices over the past 10 years have risen 88%. This is roughly 3 times general inflation. This becomes all the more alarming when we consider the fact that this is a burden placed on college students who are an extremely economically vulnerable population. The student PIRGs also disseminated a survey nationally that found that 65% of students had chosen not to buy a textbook because of prohibitive costs, and 26% actually chose to drop an entire class because they couldn't afford the course materials. We on campus actually last winter term conducted our own survey to kind of get a feel for what the situation was like on our campus. We had about 500 respondents, and we found that 39% that term alone had resorted to borrowing, scanning, and illegally downloading course materials. These are unreliable methods that can leave students in a real bind when finals week comes along, or even open to criminal charges just because they couldn't afford their course materials. We also found that in that term alone, 43% of students had to buy an access code for a course. This number becomes all the more alarming when we consider the fact that the access code is actually a relatively recent phenomenon, and the fact that they've reached this level of prevalence over just a few years suggests that they're only going to continue to grow, which makes it all the more crucial that we take action now. Finally, which I consider most alarming, we found that 73% of respondents reported that they usually spend somewhere between $100 to $500 on their textbooks every term. When you combine this with, of course, tuition costs, housing costs, which in Ashland locally are extremely high, and just the bare necessities like utilities and groceries, this just highlights the fact that students deserve to be taken into consideration when teachers are choosing what they're going to require their students to buy. Personally, like many students, I rarely buy textbooks before I enter the classroom. Often it works out fine, but there have been several cases for myself and my peers where I fall behind really quickly in what are often some of the most crucial weeks in the term that bar me from being, and my peers, from being set up for success like I and my teachers aim to achieve.
And I mean, just with everything like this, there's some misunderstandings. It's quite a common misconception that open education resource textbooks are not as effective as traditional resource textbooks, as well as they don't actually solve the college affordability problem. However, this has been proven not to be true. The University of Massachusetts, they created a pilot program that used OERs, and it saved students $1.5 million within 4 years. And they also did that at Kansas State University, and that saved students $1.1 million in 4 years. As well as Tidewater Community College in Virginia changed their entire business program to using OERs, and it cut the cost of participation in the program by 25%. And as for effectiveness, these textbooks, as I said, are designed specifically for the course they're used in. They provide the students with all the information they need. There's no unnecessary information. There's no need for the professor to fill in the cracks that some textbooks leave behind within their course materials. The math department actually currently uses 2 OERs that have been proven to work very effectively. And quite honestly, it's somewhat unbelievable to think that something that would be free is as good as something that costs money. But yeah, they do work. And basically, what we're asking you to do is we're asking you to pass a resolution in favor of OERs, as well as to recommend to your fellow faculty that they implement these in their campus classes. And I mean, we at Osprey really believe that the time is right for OERs on this campus. We have over 40 professors who have signed on with us, showing their support, as well as we collected a student petition this term that almost 800 students signed, showing that they want free textbooks. Any questions?
I have a question. What is your position on, short-term rentals of textbooks?
Like, as in, like for the term?
Yeah.
They are a good resource. However, with the use of the access code, you can't rent the book. And with more and more access codes being used, eventually renting will possibly not be an option for students.
Because some of the textbooks that might be like, let's say, not OERs, could be as little as $20 for a term.
Yeah. There are textbooks, like I'm a history major. I don't have enormously expensive textbooks, but however, I quite often need a lot of textbooks, and it just adds up. This term I didn't have a textbook over $60, but I still spent close to $200 on textbooks. So, yeah.
Yeah,
it sounds like some of the problems you're having are these access codes. And I mean, I know I try not to use textbooks a lot. A lot of my classes, I don't use it. I've been using the same book for 4 years, and then I know my students pass those on. At the end, I'm like, hey, make sure we get these students back into our hands, because I know they're expensive. Some of them are just indispensable. They're just amazing books. But maybe we could look at, eliminating that practice of the text, the codes, and let's focus on that. Because there are a lot of great textbooks out there that do help us in our teaching. And I've looked for stuff, I have, and then you find a research book that's specific for outdoor adventure leadership, it's gold, all right? But, eliminating those particular ones with the access code, I'd be all about that.
I'm sure you all do a lot with your time, but one thing you might want to consider is creating like a textbook recycling program. I know it doesn't solve the access code issue, but I know my course currently uses a textbook that doesn't require an access code. And we probably have 100 students per term taking it, and so if there was some way to recycle those textbooks, even if it's a small, like, some people will do anything for free, some people might want to sell them to someone they know rather than back to the bookstore, and so if you all might take an opportunity to try and put something like that together.
Actually, yeah, a different organization on campus has actually looked into doing something like that. The problem is because of the contract that we have with Barnes & Noble through our bookstore, we can't set one up officially. There are certain like grassroots sort of deals, like, go on Facebook, advertise it, but yeah, no, because that is a great idea, the contracts, huh?
Do you, or your organization has some program that is, I don't know, that it's trying to work in sharing research techniques or something like that for students? Because in many cases, I work with free access materials. Sometimes my students, they can find very accessible materials online. And I don't know if you're trying to share or to start a program to share research techniques or something.
That's not something we're doing with research.
Actually, if I can interject, this is something that I think I'm hearing come up. Our goal isn't to switch the entire campus over exclusively to the open education resource programs, because as you brought up, there are some books that are just invaluable. What we're really looking at is trying to get teachers to reduce costs as much as possible, and when possible, use completely free resources.
To that point, I was just in a meeting about HB 2781, and we're going to be discussing that in 2 weeks here in Senate. And part of that is a legal requirement for every university to define what a affordable textbook price is. My understanding is that every other university in Oregon has defined it between $40 and $50. I'm curious to hear your perspective on what would you call an affordable text price?
I guess this isn't exactly answering your question. The first thing that came to mind is I wonder how that would actually change the library book sharing program that requires that any textbook that costs over $100 be available for students to rent. I think that would be a big factor in the way that I would answer that question. But like Alex said, depending on your course load, even if you aren't buying like multi-$100 textbooks, it can still add up really quickly. Personally, I off the top of my head can't, I don't have an exact number prepared. Do either of you guys?
Yeah, I mean, that number, it just sounded ideal to me, but I mean,
I prefer free.
yeah.
Yeah, the law actually is going to require us to indicate in the course schedule, anytime you're signing up for classes, you have to indicate which courses have an OER or which courses have a inexpensive resource. So you would be able to tell if something in that 40-50 range, or if it's OER, or otherwise, if it doesn't have that indication, it might be more expensive.
Would that be for one particular course? I'm sorry if this is outside of the scope of the conversation, but would that be $40 to $50 for the entire term or per book?
I believe it's for the entire assignment of books that are required, I think, is my understanding. Jeff's gonna do, I mean, you might wanna come back, he's gonna do a
Yes,
presentation in 2 weeks
yes.
for us about what we have to do to get compliance for that.
Awesome.
And there was another question. Oh, okay.
So is there any kind of more or less uniform framework or set of procedures in place for those who would want to produce an OER, or is it just like
There's a grant that you can apply for. This is something you probably want to talk to Jeff about because he's helped professors such as Larry Shrewsbury and Brian Stonelake, who applied for the grant, as well as a few professors last year applied for the grant as well. So I'm not 100% sure of the logistics of the grant, but the funding would come from a grant that you have to apply. It's basically just like, you say like, my textbooks don't work for me, and this is why I want grade 1.
You know, we've been encouraging this from my office and from the provost's office. So Jeff Caton has really been leading that charge on our behalf as we want faculty and students to have the resources that they need, but we want, I think this is what you guys are saying, have a cost lens when you're ordering your resources. And don't just automatically order the latest edition, or don't just automatically order several, kind of really think through that. And Jeff is pursuing some different grants. He had told me, well, you know, we've got 2 or 3 people who are doing this, and I'm like, Jeff, at that rate, it'll be 30 years before our faculty really transitions. So trying to move it a little bit more quickly to bring down the costs of text for students. You know, we agonize over tuition increases. And 2 years ago, when we had the 9% tuition increase, that came out to about $300 a quarter. They spend $300 a quarter on books, right, and more, and we don't anguish over that in the same way. But the tuition money comes to SOU, where the textbook money is going to these textbook companies. So really just trying to heighten awareness, not to cause any decrease in quality, but to really say, yeah, as faculty, we're with the students. We also want to try to reduce the cost of these materials as much as we can. I'm glad Jeff is coming because he will know more about the specifics.
May I? I appreciate Osberg's position here. But I think there's more to it than just the financial aspect and the cost to students of the book. I switched over to an open access book in my principal's class. In fact, I'd say 2/3 of all the principals of econ classes are free ebooks. There's really a sense of solidarity between faculty and students in the classroom that has come about since I switched over to that. And so I think it's also a retention issue as well. But just more broadly, just a community building effort.
Any other thoughts or questions? All right,
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And on your way out, could you make sure you, 3 of you sign in? So
Yes.
you have your names. All right, next up we have Brett.
Well, I used half of my lung capacity on that, so I'll be brief. So I'm here as chair of the Faculty Development Committee. In the shared drive folder, you have our recommendation for awardees of the Carpenter 2 Awards, which is the second Carpenter 2 of this funding cycle. The first one happened in the spring, and this is the second one. Before I ask for your permission to move that forward, as chair of the Faculty Development Committee this year, we're striving to sit down as a committee and think about our policies and our priorities moving forward in the name of transparency and how the Faculty Development Committee goes about their work and what their charge is and whatnot. So for those senators or your constituents that have any issues, comments, concerns, question marks that you'd like Faculty Development Committee to revisit, please send those on to me if you can before Friday, because we're going to have a meeting where we're uninterrupted by having to divvy up awards, where we can just focus on priorities and policies for the rest, our goals for the rest of the year. So that's going to take place on Friday. So I invite you to email me any whatever's on your mind, and I can bring that up. So, all right. Having said that, so for the Carpenter 2 Awards, I referenced the first spring round of them because I've noticed that there's a slightly different dynamic. So in the spring, it's kind of your first shot at getting an award at Carpenter 2 for the funding cycle. And in the fall, it's the last shot for that particular conference. You can't do the same conference, multiple times for a Carpenter 2 award in the same year. And so to that end, the committee was able to award 35 out of 35 requests because it felt like it was kind of the last shot for funding for some of those projects. And so it was 35 requests of $25,000 supporting $50,000 worth of projects, and I believe the available funding was about $12,000, so we were able to meet about half of the funding requests, dollar amount across 100% of the applicants. That's that. Any questions? I'm happy to field those. All right.
Were these the requests that were due on October 15th?
Yes.
Well done.
Well, I'm not 100% sure about the exact date, but yes, yes, this fall.
I would commend you on, for you representing the committee, that was pretty fast and well done.
I'm requesting to waive the 2-week rule. Do I do that?
I will, well, if there's any discussion, I will make that first motion.
Any motion?
I will make the motion to support the Faculty Personnel Committee for awarding Carpenter.
First, you gotta waive the 2-week rule.
Oh, God. I'll make the motion to waive the 2-week rule.
Do we have a second?
It's right here.
Any further discussion on that question? All right, all those in favor of waiving the 2-week rule, please indicate so. All those opposed to waiving the 2-week rule? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. Next, we have a motion on the approval of the recommendation? All right, any second? Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the recommendations for Carpenter 2 awards, please indicate so.
If you're getting one, you should abstain.
Yes, you should generally abstain if you're getting one.
Oh, I'm
Precious. You're getting one.
It'll be easier if Mike's abstain.
Okay.
People all putting their hands up.
Hokey pokey. All those opposed to approving the recommendations for Carpenter 2 awards?
Dennis, you know those, right?
No. I was distracted.
I'm good like
It's
this.
the sun going.
He can see it if his name is still on.
So who's
Okay,
abstaining?
so who is abstaining?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Mary Ann.
You're abstaining? I'm abstaining. Okay, just for Chad, Josie, Deb, Precious, and Mary. Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think it
All
does.
right.
Figure it out later.
The motion passes, I believe, correct?
So as Brent was leaving, I was asking him a question, and he said, oh, I can answer that for everybody. What I was asking him was if there's been well, clearly there has been an increase in people applying for the grant, because when I was on the committee a few years ago, never did I read 35 proposals, and so Brett was gonna answer that for everyone.
Yeah, well, I have an answer, but I could
Comment
on it and then invite some other observations from other people as well. I've been on the committee a year and a half, maybe 2 at most. 35 was the highest number I've seen. It was about 20, 25, I think, in the spring, Carpenter too. So I think the timing of it plays a role. But that's one of the reasons why the Faculty Development Committee is getting together on Friday to kind of take the pulse of where we're at and what it is that we're trying to do and what the charge is from because it was always described to me as there was a kind of a different history with some of the Carpenter 1 and Carpenter 2 have evolved over time a little bit in terms of the nature of the demand for the funding. And so, right when I started on the committee maybe a year and a half ago, in fact it was described to me when I started at SU 3 years ago that just apply to the Carpenter 2, the committee just splits it evenly among everybody all the time, which has not been the case since I've been on the committee. Not because of me, but just because that hadn't been the case for some years. And so I think that is reflective of this growing competition, right, for these grants, right? So again, we had $12,000 we were able to fund $12,000 and we had requests for $24,000 on this. And in the year and a half, there's always been more requests than there's been available funding, some of my experience. And I think that has a lot to do with the resurgence in hiring, right? In terms of 3 years ago, I'm thinking of my cohort, right? I'm looking around and seeing Red Maggie and several others, right? And so there's a kind of a little bit of a swell in the number of junior faculty that are actively pursuing it. And so that's one of the things that we would like feedback on. Is one, what are the confusions and surrounding how these things are divvied up, and what are some recommendations and concerns, or if there's a sense of that it's not a transparent enough process. We're going to discuss the feedback for it, right? Because every round that I've been a part of, I've had people stop me and ask, so what happened? Why mine? Why not mine? Or something, right? And so we're looking for a little more consistency on that front because I think it has changed over time. And so the committee has found itself in a more delicate position, especially in the sense of wrestling with how in the world can one, especially for conference travel, rank, say, somebody attending, doing a performance at a theater or percussion conference versus someone presenting a paper in criminology, right, or something, right? So the balance, the committee, I think, has felt the gravity of that balance shifting as well, and so that's why I kind of want to open the dialogue too. So it wasn't really an answer to your question, but that provides a little insight of what I think the committee is wrestling with and addressing.
I know when I was on it, there was an effort to give a little more to the junior faculty, but we certainly didn't fund all, even partially, all of the requests.
Right.
So
Yeah,
this-
and then like I said, in this last spring round of the Carpenter 2, there was a more of an appetite for funding fewer but more fully.
Mhm.
And this round, right, and the idea, the argument at that time, the idea was, well, the fall round, if you got funded, say, $50, to take an extreme example, in the spring, that makes you ineligible to apply again for Carpenter 2 in the fall round for the same conference. And that seemed a little unfair. And so the idea, the appetite in the spring was to fund more fully, fewer, in the spring. And that way, if somebody were funded 0 or denied, right, then we're eligible to apply in the fall. So that may have also influenced why we had 35 applicants this fall. Right, some of that push from the spring. But so there's no rules in play, there's no rhyme or reason really, but that's the dynamic of the last 2 rounds.
It's good that you're discussing it and trying to improve the process.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, you said 20 or 25 requests in the spring, about how many were funded?
I'd have to look at my notes. I'd say off the top of my head, 75% or 2/3.
Yes, you have a question?
So what is your process for feedback? Just email you or something? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's a start. So like I mentioned, on Friday, we have a meeting. We just set the meeting today. So we have our meeting to talk about policies and priorities for the year. So my inbox is available for either you or your constituent, and that's a starting point.
What time is the meeting?
What's that?
What time is the meeting on Friday? They have to get
1:30.
it back to you by when?
1:30 on Friday is when we meet.
Has that amount gone up ever? Does it go up every year, or has it been the same?
That's a better question if Jody were here. She's our ex officio member. One question the committee had, the committee's just given a number. Here's what's available. And one of the questions that the committee had when we met was, it was a nice round number of 12,000. Who decides that, right? And the question came up because say you get an award, Chad, and you decide not to go to that conference, and you write a letter and say, I didn't spend this. That money goes back into the pot. And so the committee was surprised that we had a nice round number of 12,000 bestowed upon us when we knew, right, there was probably some pocket change that went in and out. And so exactly how that goes back into the fund and who makes the decision about what's available, if Jody were here, I would defer that and I would answer to her.
Doing great.
I would just offer that every year when the professional development monies go through, if you haven't spent your money at the end of the 2 years, that there's portions of it that can be swept or faculty leave, and there's funds that are unspent in PDA, and that goes to the provost office, and there's a pot of money that sits there, which you can ask for additional funds to go along with the funds that you've received through Carpenter, through your PDA and beyond, because there's some really expensive things out there, like airplane tickets and conference hotel rooms, that oftentimes it can take you 2 years to save, and you're still only covering the tip of the iceberg. So there's funds that are available there, and that's often double that amount of money that will be sitting there. And you can go through your division director. There's a really nice form. There's support for it. And I've seen in our division awards given for professional development in that manner. So I would say that consider those funds available. If you didn't get the amount you were hoping for, if there's an additional gap, go after those funds that are sitting in the provost office that are there to help assist you with this endeavor for professional development. So I don't know where the 12,000 mark comes from, but I will say there are additional funds that you're entitled to and you should go after. So please do.
Yeah. So just to be clear, that's a different fund. So if you got a Carpenter 2 and you didn't travel, when I said it goes back into the pot, we're talking about different pots.
Different pots.
Yes.
Larry, is there a name for that, the little pot of money?
The provost office spending. Let me look it up, and before the end of the meeting, I'll get back to you on it.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for Brett? All right, you're good, thank you.
All right, well that second part's gonna cost you another cookie.
All right, Charles, you have come back with your amended bylaw proposal?
Our discussion 2 weeks ago centered on section 1.214. We had a short discussion, if you recall, about this temporary appointment, faculty basically seeking out their own replacement. The discussion centered on we should actually make sure that if this is a division appointment, that the replacement comes from within the division. There was also discussion about the imprinter of the Senate Advisory Council sort of finalizing this whole process. So to that end, I went back into 1.214. All that's really changed there is there's a 3-sentence addition at the end of 1.214 that talks about the requirement for a division appointment to be replaced from within the division. No such requirement for an at-large replacement, and that it bears the imprinter of the Senate Advisory Council before it goes any further. So it's simply a 3-sentence addition to 1.214, hopefully trying to capture what we did with that discussion.
Any questions or discussion?
You put this in the, this is on the drive?
Yes. On the drive since I can read it.
Bylaws revision, possible vote, that's what it is?
Yes. The full bylaw is, should a senator be scheduled absent from Senate meetings for up to and including one full academic term, the senator will identify a temporary replacement and inform the faculty senate chair. That replacement will be from within the division for a senator elected from the division. A replacement for an at-large senator need not be confined to the absent senator's division. The Senate Advisory Council will approve the replacement for an absent senator. That's pretty much, I think, what everyone recommended last week. Is there any further discussion on that?
Well, I just, quick question, so, and I apologize, I missed last time. But if now it says up to and including one full term, so that would imply a single meeting. It could apply to a single meeting, right?
I think that implication is there, yes.
I mean, that's how I'm reading that.
Yes.
So then my question is, if somebody is going to be absent for one meeting and they want to send a replacement, this says, and it says it has to be approved by the advisory council. Is that what we want, to have an approval for a single meeting?
Especially if it's last minute.
Yeah.
Advisory council could do it by email.
It's true. Okay.
It's only people.
Because we don't currently allow proxy votes, right?
Right.
So this would essentially create a window for more or less a proxy vote. If someone couldn't be there, they could send someone their place.
I mean, I'm okay with it, I was just trying to clarify that the way it reads, it does apply, it says it would apply for single
That's
meetings.
a good observation.
Again, just to clarify, we're talking about it, if I wasn't gonna be here for the next meeting, and I wanted to have one of my colleagues step in and be here for me, I'd have to get it approved. I mean, before we just
Never
say,
done
hey,
that, yeah.
we've never done that before, I personally would rather keep it where we don't have to get it approved, and.
What technically, someone could come and sit in your seat, but they couldn't vote.
Right,
Yeah.
that's the way it is now.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Anybody can come.
Yeah, I would just want them to come so they can get the information and pass it on.
Right, so
Not
this
the
would
ability
be-
For them to vote, they would have to get approved.
Gotcha, okay.
Right.
I would back that up, yeah.
Yeah, because a replacement senator means they
Yeah,
actually,
gotcha, yep, makes sense.
they were acting senator.
Makes sense, yep.
So any thoughts about that? Does anyone want to make a motion or a further recommendation to the Constitution Committee for additional changes?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay, and is that what to approve all three
Yep.
bylaws revisions?
Yep.
All right, we have a second?
All three?
Yeah, there's 1.214, 1.215, and 1.222.
Well,
There's only
five.
two in the,
Two.
there's only two in the, this meeting's.
They're in one document.
They're in
The 214 and 215 are in one document. So we had a second, Precious, any further discussion? We can take a pause if people are a little confused about what's happening, so make sure everyone understands.
The other two that are in there, I believe, are what we talked about last week.
Yes.
It's just
The only one that had
that's
feedback was
different
this
from
one.
last week is this little thing about the.
That's right. The red ink is the section that was added since last meeting. Everything else was exactly as it was 2 weeks ago.
Very clear. So, relevant, related to our last discussion, does it make sense to clarify in here the difference between somebody just attending and but not having a proxy vote, or is that too confusing to have to add that in there?
I think that's somewhere else, isn't it?
Is it someone else?
Isn't there something somewhere else about like no proxy votes?
I think so, but I'd have to look.
Have to look. But with approval from the advisory council, would they have proxy vote or still wouldn't have it?
Well, they would be an acting senator.
It would be a replacement, so.
And the advisory council is the one who would make that decision.
The
As
senator
written,
would
yes.
choose their replacement and then ask for that person.
For approval.
Great.
I'm just
It doesn't
wondering.
mean they have to do it. If someone's
Right.
missing one meeting, they don't have to send a replacement.
Right.
People don't want us.
No, most people do.
They do.
Most people who miss a Senate meeting send somebody from their division or department. And in the past, I thought we allowed them to vote. So we might not have been
Well, if they
following
have,
the
the
letter
bylaws
of the
don't
law.
allow it.
Yeah.
Currently.
Yeah,
Now
they
they
definitely
sort of
don't.
The language says the senator will identify, it doesn't say may identify, so I mean, are we then implying that if you are going to be absent, you will send an option to the advisory council?
That does imply that, so.
So should a senator be scheduled absent from Senate meetings for up to and including one full academic year?
Year or term?
Academic term, sorry, term. Should a senator be scheduled absent?
So you're only saying they will
Up to.
If they're gone for an
For a full
academic
term.
term, not if they
Full
miss
academic.
one meeting.
Well, up to and including.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
But it's not one
1.213.
meeting, it's one term.
213, the one right before this, says proxy votes are not allowed for senators not in attendance at the meeting. That's the one right before the ones we were revising. So if you logically would move down the bylaws, then I would say that one would say no proxy votes, but I don't know if we can put a sentence in there saying no proxy votes, or I think the issue really, I think what we're really getting at is if somebody's on sabbatical for a term, which is where this really comes up, can that individual have a replacement for the term and vote? And I think the yes. I don't know.
Without having to go through a special election,
Yeah.
which is very time consuming.
And so for that, I think that that's completely fine. I don't know how many times there's been a replacement, but if we just keep it proxy votes are not allowed, then they don't need AC approval to attend as a proxy, but they can't vote. They can attend in the discussion, they just have to abstain from any voting.
If they're concerned, they can get approval.
Can they get approval when they show up here that day, or do they have to have prior approval?
To just come, nobody.
No, to vote.
To vote.
Let's say the
So you're
day
saying,
of, somebody
in
got sick.
theory,
have
you
somebody
send
else.
someone, the
Something
Kent
important's
Advisory
happening.
Council real quick have a
So we
discussion,
huddle,
approve
yeah.
it.
But like, okay, you can vote. Just.
Yeah, you
So
can
many
do
hypotheticals.
I mean, we could also recommend, the Constitution Committee, say, instead of up to and including, just for meetings of one full term, if you want to restrict it to cases where someone really is going to be gone for a full term, we
I
can do
mean, I
that
think
too.
that's where we started.
That's, I think, where we
But that was
started.
the spirit of the whole thing.
Considering we abstain, if we haven't been here at the previous meeting, it seems a bit odd to bring someone in to vote who hasn't been there.
Good point.
It would happen in a contentious vote where somebody thinks it's gonna be really, really close.
Yes.
We gotta get a vote and I can't come.
Yeah.
You have to go vote for me.
Charles, what
I'm
was
just
your,
saying this is
what was your thinking when you went
We
with
have
up
some
to and
voted
including?
close bill.
That was what was there before, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that actually was up in there before.
So the up to and including was part of the original?
Well, that's not what it says here. I mean, if you look at the text from the original, I assume that's what.
It says, yeah, the original says for one
For
full
one full
academic term.
academic term.
And you changed it to up to and including 2 weeks ago. Not, this wasn't a new change this time, but in your original proposal.
But what we were talking about, if it is contentious, that person wants their voice heard.
It's in the, it's misleading.
There, but they were at the.
Go there.
There.
This one.
Right.
Right, maybe we want them to be able to.
I think, I can see if it's gonna be close and they wanna make sure that that senator is represented.
And they're
Not a
representing the
proxy.
faculty in their division
Yeah.
who feel very strongly
We
about
don't have a
something.
lot of these, but we do have one.
As long as it's approved by AC, which is what the proposed bylaw
Right.
is saying, then
And,
it's acceptable.
and you might even have to clarify that, a majority of AC.
Yeah, yeah, what
I
does
mean,
it mean?
I can't even imagine a case where AC would not approve. I mean,
Can I
that
make
would
an
just be
executive
really-
signing statement? Like this?
Of course you can.
So where do we want to go with this? We have a second on the table, so we can move forward approving. Is that the read of the room? Do we want to go ahead and?
So I would just say that if we approve this as is, then that basically allows a proxy vote for somebody if approved by AC.
Yep. Yeah.
That's what the implication is, I would agree, and I'm okay with that.
Meaning if AC approves the person, they have the rights of a regular
They
senator.
are a senator for that meeting.
So would it be helpful just to make that clear? I mean, to say something, the Senate Advisory Council will approve the replacement of an absent senator in order to allow them to have a proxy vote or something.
It's not a proxy vote anymore if they are
They're
senator.
not-
Right,
not a
like they're
proxy.
the-
But then it's just a
Rights and
replacement
privileges.
senator, and they become the
Or
replacement
rights and
senator for
privileges,
the
yes.
duration.
Of the absence.
But as Anna said, it doesn't say when it has to be done, we need more language if we're going to do that. 5 minutes before Senate, or?
Well,
I mean, you could write like 6 pages about this, about like, what if someone has a car accident right before the meeting?
Maybe we just approve it, and then if we find issues, we could adapt it next year.
so one thought is, reading all this here. So the 1.215 has the sentence, at the end of the scheduled absence, the originally elected senator shall resume his/her duties with the faculty senate. That's not in 1.214. The question is now, because I think we were envisioning, again, someone who's gone for an entire term. Well, I guess a plain reading could suggest that if someone replaces you for a single meeting, they actually end up replacing you for the rest of the term, whether you like it or not.
That's true.
Well, because the 1.215 specifically says the end of the scheduled absence, the original elected senator shall resume, but the 214 doesn't say
Doesn't have
when the
that
person
sentence.
resumes.
Wait, but since the
This is
215
why we
is
signed up
staying
for this.
like that, why did that
True.
suddenly superseded?
We need Sherry.
No, I'm saying for 214, it doesn't say when someone, when does the person resume, it doesn't say it.
But since we have 215, does 214 have to say it also?
I'm not sure. 215 isn't it specifically applying to a temporary vacancy on the Senate of more than one academic term?
Temporary.
It just says temporary vacancy.
It says of more than one term.
And that's when there is a
By
special
special
election.
All right, so you need more language?
Seems to
I
me that
don't
we
know.
might need that line at the end of.
I'm honestly okay with whatever. That's not supposed to say it's the choice.
Charles?
I mean, you could put that additional sentence in 214, the parallelity between.
And we could do that as a in the room addendum, right? We don't have to send it back to you to do that.
We don't necessarily have to send it back.
Yeah.
We're wordsmithing as a committee at the whole, but if we could pull that off, then, more power to us.
So Brian,
Well, there's no rush in this, right?
I mean, only in the sense that, I would love to get this approved by at least by our next Senate meeting, so that if it turns out we have another one of these things where someone's gone next term, we don't go through the same mess we just went through. That's I think the main.
Yeah, I mean, like, my original suggestion was just that, it just isn't done, at a bar when the guy or woman is leaving town, I mean, like, oh, hey, I forgot my Senate meeting, can you fill in for me, and then they just go. And
So
they-
can you add language that says must not be decided at bar?
That's obviously.
Or
an
a
extreme
code.
case. That's
Don't
an
do
extreme
it
case,
at a bar.
but it's really like, that there should be some process of approval, because we have that approval
Right.
process to be a senator in the first place. So there should be something in place for the replacement of said person.
So I'm just going to make a point here that when we started this conversation, we were 10 minutes ahead of schedule. We're now 5 minutes behind. So Brian, would you like to amend your
No,
motion?
I just want to bring up the point that 213, which we haven't discussed, talks about proxy votes. And it says, quote, proxy votes are not allowed for senators not in attendance at the meeting. Proxy votes are allowed if A senator must leave a meeting that exceeds the expected getting time, which we're approaching, after informing the secretary of the fact that he or she has left a proxy with another senator. The expected ending time for a Senate meeting has been set for 5:30. So if we're going to talk about the implication that a proxy is in 2.14, if somebody was in a contentious situation, couldn't they just email? The only way that there could be a proxy code in an emergency is to leave the vote with the secretary? To add more flavor to this already stewing
Who
words.
was a member of advisory council?
How many times has there been a proxy vote where we've needed somebody to come in and actually do that? Has it happened frequently?
I think that the whole time I was secretary, people would just, the replacements just voted. We allowed it.
Supposed to.
I'm sorry.
But what about?
All right, so there is still a motion on the table. Does anyone want to amend that motion?
I don't even know what motion's on the table right now.
I took the motion on the table and I will
Oh, you
amend
did? Okay, I
it
thought
to include the sentence that is at the end of 1.215,
Okay.
at the end of 2.1. Yes, that one.
So at the end of the schedule,
Just
absent
copy
the
and
originally
paste
elected senator.
that sentence up above, and then I move to approve this.
All right, so second, do you, right. Number 2. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amended motion to approve the 3 bylaws revisions with the addendum of bringing the bottom sentence of 1.215 and copying it into the bottom of 1.214, please indicate by raising your hand.
I thought we couldn't make the motion. All right, I'm abstaining. After all, I'm abstaining.
I hope you vote no. Just
all those to the opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. All right, all those abstaining, please.
I guess
raise
that would be
your
us.
All right. The motion passes.
Okay.
That was exciting. All right. So Dale is not here to represent the University Studies Strand courses. They were presented last week. I did want to mention a kind of update to them, which is that we did have a discussion both in this meeting, and a discussion followed an email between a number of parties afterward about the potential confusion around the English course, in which a number of different versions of the course are taught, but that only one of them would be approved for the Strand. And I think they also have another strand that's already been approved under the same conditions. And English has volunteered to adopt a letter to their Strand course number. So it's, hold up here. So that would be,
It's English 447.
so thank you. So it'll be, so they will go to curriculum committee and ask for a change to ENG 447J for this J-Strand approval, right? That's what it was this time?
I believe the recommendation is going to look similar to what they're doing in COM, because they do have some English 447 I strands, and it's more than one that's an I strand, that it made sense to maybe go in with the A and the B and the C and D title specific to the lettering, which would allow then the tying to the appropriate strand.
Gotcha. So, in any case, my understanding is that what both the English department and the undergraduate studies committee is asking for is for an approval of this course with the understanding that ENG will go to curriculum committee to find a permanent resolution of this course number, so it is clear and transparent to students which versions of the course are Strand approved. So whatever motion that might be made today, please include that in your motion. So is there anyone who would like to make a motion on this approval of the 3 courses up for?
And I'd like to make a motion to approve the courses for university studies with the curriculum committee's clarification or whatever we want to call it. Don't put that in the title.
Understood. And do we have
Wordsmith
a
as a
second?
group.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that? Yes. All right, all those in favor of approving these university studies courses with the clarification for English, please indicate with your hand. All right. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. All right, so with that, I will once again ceremoniously give the gavel over to Mary Ann so that she can preside over further discussion and or the possible motion of the JSIMA.
Any questions, comments, motions? You remember what that was about? I'm in the right class.
This is for the proposal of the digital civil major?
Yes.
I propose them to pass it, move it.
So you're making a motion to pass
Yeah,
it?
I'm making a motion to pass the proposal for the digital civil major.
And Laurie, you're second. Any discussion? Mike?
Well, I was the guy who raised the big issue about the course fees, so I did some research, because I was unaware. But course fees are everywhere at our university, all over most departments, from a few dollars for science labs to hundreds of dollars for some courses that have long field trips involved. One area of our university doesn't do it as a course fee, they just simply add $10 per credit hour to every student who takes a course out of that area. That's similar to a course fee. Where I remain confused, but not enough for me to get too excited, is it's not clear what happens to excess funds. So if we collect more than we need, do the students get a refund or not? And I think mostly they don't. Or where does the money come from if there's a shortage? If we didn't collect enough, how do we make up the difference? I was unable to get a clear answer to that question. There's some evidence that excess funds, if we collect too much, are swept to the general fund at the end of every year, and then Churchill Hall decides what's going to happen to the excess funds. Although there's maybe a case where if somebody's collecting course fees to make a pretty big capital expenditure, they could save it up for a while and then spend it later. So course fees happen everywhere. Course fees range wildly. $90 for these courses is on the high side of what I found, but it's not the highest. And I remain confused. I don't know if you know the answer. What happens if you collect too much? What happens to the money?
Right, so I don't know what happens across all university courses that do this, because there are actually different kinds of course fees as well. They get categorized when you create the spreadsheet and tell people what when you propose a course fee, you have to say how you're going to use it. In the case of digital semi courses that currently exist in COM, I know that the arrangement is that these are a technology course fee. So there actually is no such thing as them not being used. It goes, in some cases, the technology is a specific ask. So for instance, Precious and I are co-teaching a course in advanced VR production right now, and we had to get some software just for this class. So that was the first pool from those funds. And then the leftover goes directly to the digital cinema, the digital media center's technology fund. Because they've just spent, a bunch of money on new cameras, and that goes to replenish that equipment fund.
So some students who didn't take that class are being charged for something that they didn't get.
No. So what I'm saying is that every student who took that class had I think it was a $75 course fee in that class. Approximately, I think, $55 of that went just to a software for that class. And then the rest of the funds went into supporting the equipment, the overall equipment resources that both students in that class have, and also all students within the major. If that makes sense.
Okay, and so there's no such thing as not charging enough? I'm sorry,
You're-
charging too much.
Not in the case of the technology fees that
We'll
are
find a way to
specifically
say it.
designated
Alright.
going towards equipment.
Okay.
I do know that my understanding is that there are other kinds of course fees that other programs do have where students can say like, oh, this was specifically for a field trip, not that much money was spent on the field trip, I should get a refund.
Right.
But in these cases, the description is this goes to support your overall equipment access, so.
And when we don't charge enough, where does the extra money come from?
That comes from Brandon's general fund. So not the general fund of the university, but he maintains a fund balance at the Digital Media Center. So that was when he was talking about the fact that, the Digital Media Center does a number of client-based productions in which they hire students to work on these. And brings in revenue that way, and that goes directly into the fund. And also, I do know that I don't know quite how it all works, but there is a contribution that the university puts every year towards the Digital Media Center to maintain a sort of fund balance in case, let's say, we have cameras that are worth over $5,000, and yet our insurance deductible is $5,000. So if we lose one of those cameras, we're at $5,000 no matter what. We have the resources to withstand that kind of hit if something were to happen.
Okay.
I don't know if it applies to every course that charges fees, but in the one that we have, a small course fee for technology, if you don't use it in the year, it goes back to the general fund.
Right. That's what I think is kind of the prevailing mode that happens. So, but I was unable to get an answer. How often does that happen? And maybe we should think hard about our course fees. Maybe we're collecting too much. I mean, I'm worried about how much these kids are spending. So, in our department, we have some, and I was unaware that we had some, so I'm on the committee of the school of business to understand how much did we get, what did we spend, and are we charging too much? Because I worry about that.
And I do want to just, again, say for the record that the intention for the new major courses is actually to bring the course fee a little lower, because right now, many of these courses in which we have a $75 fee, they are electives, and so an elective that we offer might load at 10, and that class goes, and we need to have the fees in order to have the equipment. But many of these are now becoming required courses, so we know that they will fill at a higher rate, which means we think that we can bring the course fees down. So we have we're proposing a $90 limit, but that does not mean that that is where the course fees will be set at.
Right. Well, I'll update you guys in the spring when we look at ours, run audit hours to see, show me the receipts, not just it was on a ledger somewhere. So what happened, what was the money collected for, and what was it used for, and where did we end up?
Any other comments, questions?
I had a question about how the major would be designated under the communications group. Like right now, there's a minor, right? There's a digital
Concentration.
There's both a minor and a concentration. So right now, you can either be a digital cinema minor, or you can be a communication major concentrating in digital cinema. That will go away, the concentration will go away, and there will now just be a digital cinema major and continuing to be a digital cinema minor.
Okay. And within, so it'll be a communications major with a couple concentrations, but not digital cinema.
Right, the comm studies and social media and public engagement concentrations will continue as is.
So will they rename the department then?
Don't think there's any plan to rename the department now.
How would, based on the proposal, you would become the chair of that program?
No, I'm going to be a program coordinator. Eric Palmer is chair of communication, will continue to be the chair over both majors. So I'll be doing, I'm kind of unofficially a program coordinator anyway right now in digital cinema. I kind of help advise on what courses will be offered. I kind of set up when the classes need to be offered and all that kind of stuff.
So this was, I don't know if program coordinators get this, but is there a course release then?
There can be. There's not anticipated to be, certainly, at least in the first year of it. Right now, there's no plan for me to get a course release.
Program coordinators in business don't really.
Yeah, there's several in business.
I've got 150 marketing students, and there's nothing that comes with that other than. as you know, the glory.
Yeah, there are some programs that do have program coordinators that, you know, it gets big enough for whatever reason. I don't know what that, there's a formula in the bargaining agreement about that, but I don't remember what it is, but I know that I'm not gonna be getting commercials this time.
Has there been any updates in the last 2 weeks since we met?
Oh, thank you for reminding me. So, yeah, the only update, well, we had a great discussion in music, nothing that's gonna affect, the immediate, proposal. We, do anticipate some collaborations, coming forward, and hopefully next year maybe. I wanted to put in a note, that, when this next draft goes to the Board of Trustees, I would like to include Marianne has a course, it's French 350 French cinema course. That would just be, the only thing that's going to change is adding to that a list of electives that are available. So if you could approve it with that addendum, if you should choose to approve it, we would like that. And that way I can just go ahead and look at it.
If there's no further discussion or questions, we can vote on accepting the proposal. So if you are in favor, please raise your hand. I guess I'm okay. I don't ask for anything else if everybody approved, right?
We're supposed to correct.
Oh, any abstentions?
Opposed.
Oh, opposed? Like that would happen. Any abstentions? Wow, good job. An exciting major. Oh, motion passed. Hey, buddy.
Give me the
Wonderful. Be careful, Brian.
I know. All right, well, thank you all, I appreciate it. Announcements and new business.
Well, I just wanted to have some, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Brenda. Oh, okay, just something that I forgot to say, and I don't know if that's going to create a big discussion or not, but when we decided as a committee, the Committee on Committees, to send everybody, the chairs of the committees, a request to find out how everything is going, because when you read what I send next week, it's going to say that part of our charge is to actually assign jobs and make sure that everybody's doing, I mean, there's a lot more supervision than what we're doing right now, which is nothing. Jim, who's chair of one of the committees, wrote back saying that he has minutes that are on the Google Drive, not Google, on the, maybe Google Drive or on Moodle, I can't remember, that anybody can read, and he's concerned about meetings that sometimes happen a little bit, for lack of a better word, secretly, and he feels that there should be a general movement towards, especially for the Senate committees, to have minutes publicly available. And so I don't know if people take minutes in your committee meetings, but that's something that he wanted me to bring up. So just something to think about for when we talk about the bigger picture in a couple of weeks.
Over the summer, under the President Schatz's own interest, she was very interested in possibly developing an esports team at SOU, so a competitive online gaming team, and she had asked me, since I'm the Video Gamers Coalition advisor and teach the COM 460 Video Game and Cultures class, to go to this conference, attend this conference on esports, where I met with like different coaches and different people that were interested in intercollegiate or competitive esports within their university. So tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the Hannon Library and the DeBoer Room, which I think is 322, I'll be presenting a bunch of information on esports, university esports, and what that looks like. It's not voting on anything or like pushing forward, it's just a lot of information for the athletics department, student life, and then anyone else who wants to just receive that information.
What's esports?
It's competitive online gaming, so like World of Warcraft, League of Legends,
Oh.
different type of teams, and a lot of universities are now participating in it.
It's huge, Jackie.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'll be sending out an email to all APSU. We have our nominations put forth, so there will be an election that will be open for 5 days starting tomorrow for APSU board positions. Please vote.
On November 29th, on a Thursday, we're going to have, I guess we're going to call it maybe like a capstone presentation for our master's students. They're going to be presenting their research in a poster presentation in the foyer. They're going to be over in the Mies Auditorium. And then they're going to be talking about their expedition that they did over the summer. So we went from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea over the Caucasus over 35 days. And big slideshow presentation, and we're going to have a little finish-off documentary with it.
When is that again?
The 29th of November, which is a Thursday night at 5 p.m. Yep.
One announcement I meant to, sorry, I meant to make a gift to Mary Ann, and this isn't an official announcement, just something maybe to pencil in on your calendars. Is that the Board of Trustees has reached out about the possibility of doing another sort of meet and greet in March. So we're looking at probably around the board meeting at the end of the spring, or end of the winter term. So that I think is March 21st, 22nd, something like that. Right before spring break begins. But it's not confirmed yet, and that will be the timing, but I did want to give everyone sort of a heads up and be thinking about that as an opportunity to sort of
On the 28th at between 4:30 and 5:30, the English department and the Ed department are hosting a careers in education panel discussion. It'll be primarily about English and social studies, but really any of your undergrads who think they might like to be teachers should come, even if they want to teach math or PE, where we'll be there to talk. Have some of our recent grads who are teaching locally and also who have taught overseas. So if you have anybody, that's on the 28th, 4:30 to 5:30 in the Decker Writing Studio in Central Hall.
Do you think you could send us a little?
Yeah, I can send that. I've got a Margaret Carroll made a flyer, so.
Yeah, one more announcement from me. The Digital Cinema faculty, the SOU Film Club, the QRC, and the WRC, and the Ashland Independent Film Festival are co-sponsoring a free screening in the Music Recital Hall on Sunday, the 18th at 4 p.m. of a documentary called Call for Uganda. And it is as part of Trans Day of Remembrance, a really amazing film, and the director of that film will be doing a Skype Q&A with all in attendance.
At what time?
That's
Sorry.
at 4 to 7 p.m. on the 18th.
November.
Yes.
Yes.
This Sunday.
Right.
And could you send us something to give to the students to show?
Sure. Yeah, I can forward you the poster that Mr. Lucas made. Any other announcements or new business?
You too, it would be great, John, if you could send us a flyer or something.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you all. Adjourned.